Hi, I'm Jim Knotts, President and CEO of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund. Welcome to today's virtual reading of the names. 2022 marks the 40th anniversary of the dedication of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in Washington, D.C. As part of our commemoration, we'll host an in-person reading of the names at the wall from November 7th through 10th, 2022, when all 58,281 names on the wall will be read aloud. In the lead up to that event, we'll be reading names each day online while sharing the photos of these heroes. For our daily virtual reading, the names of the service members will be read by month and day of death between the years 1956 and 1975 in alphabetical order for the given day. We apologize in advance for any mispronunciations. Know that our readers are doing their best to honor these service members. We hope you'll listen and watch each day and share with others as we remember and honor those who gave their lives during the Vietnam War.
Ricky Faye Adams, Calvin Eugene Alexander, Earl Irvin Althouse, George Dale Arnold, James Victor Backlund, Albert Franklin Baird, Elvis Gordon Barker, Budrow Bass Jr., Frank David Bazell, Larry Wayne Benge, Arnold Ray Benton, Paul Vernon Black, Dwayne Rodney Black, Michael J. Blottenberger, Stephen Joseph Bobkovich, Leonard Joseph Bosick, Donald Warren Bowman, Terrence Lee Bowl, Richard Saulers Bowers, Jesse L. Brandon, Dale Vincent Bremerman Jr., Lyndon Wayne Brittingham, Daniel Lee Brock, Daniel Dean Bruce, Arthur Lee Brunt, Gary Lee Brusk, Richard James Burnett, Thomas Lee Burton, William Burton Jr., Gregory William Butler, Jerry Dwayne Byers, Clyde William Campbell, Richard Allen Carapezza, Reginald F. Carter Jr., William Murr Christensen, James Hamilton Colbert, Robert Joseph Costa, James Adolph Kraft, Robert Irving Crane, Earl Leon Crissell Jr., Arthur Allen Crosby Jr., William Ledfer Cunningham, David Richard Daniels, Richard Lewis Daniels, Gary Charles David, Ray Rennie Davis, Leonard Peter Deinlein, Raymond Rodriguez Delgado, Bertram Anthony Deso, Charles Frank Duell, Lawrence Addison Dodd, Francis Charles Donahue, Thomas Brown Dodd, Eric Thomas Duffer, Joe Daniel Dunn, Adolphus Ellis, Thomas J. Evans, Jr., Jerry Wayne Farron, Frank Fatuccia, David Allen Floyd, William Patrick Foran, William David Frawley, Nicholas Heffer Fritz, Thomas Lee Gaines, Jr.,
Carl Ray Gantz, Richard Lee Garlick, Louis Aaron George, John Brown Gibson, Jr., Willie Giles, Jr., Sammy Wayne Goldman, Carlos Luis Gonzalez, Rodney Michael Good, Thomas Charles Gosch, Joseph John Grande, Jr., John Paul Grimmenstein, Jr., Jimmy Ray Gross, Rudolph Gordado, Sheldon Lee Gulseth, Edward Lewis Harris, Michael Anthony Harvey, Michael Kenneth Hastings, Paul Walter Hines, Dale George Helgeson, Gary Arland Hendrickson, Tommy Doyle Higgerson, Larry Jean Higginbotham, John Charles Hill, Alvester Hill, Charles Michael Hobbs, Jose Holguin, Jr., Nathan Holmes, Michael William Holzman, George Victor Jemaeff, Roland Ralph John, Jimmy Lee Johnson, Robert Edward Johnson, Richard Worrell Capp, Jr., Wendell Richard Keller, Michael Eugene Kelly, Alfred Lemuel Kinzer III, Lonnie Ralph King, Joseph Robert King, Jr., Lawrence John Clausen, William Richard Clawiter, Herbert Wheeler Klug, Benny Kizek, Stephen Thomas Kousis, Richard Clive Lanham, Danny Ledford, Larry Dwayne Leach, Stanley Reed Luter, Frederick Beard Link, Rodney Dale Lloyd, Robert Lopez, David Eugene Lovegren, Douglas Joseph Markovich, Gerald William Marquith, Bruce Lewis Marosites, Gary Allen Martin, Gregory Allen Marvin, John William Massey, Jr., Donald Richard Mayberry, Joseph Mays, George M. Mays, Jr., Jeffrey McClatchy, Jr., William Robert McJimsey, Robert Patrick Menninger, Virgil Kirsch Maroney III,
Richard Dennis Miller, Edward Michael Misuta, Kenneth Mitchell, Benny Ray Monkus, John Herbert Moreno, Alden Frank Moray, Jr., Robert Eugene Moss, Leslie Eugene Murray, Dan Lee Neely, Victor Ohanessian, Gary Lee Oliver, Richard Jeffrey Petrie, Frank David Pena, Lawrence William Porter, Everett Charles Pugh, Henry Pullum, Jr., James J. L. Pumphrey, David Thomas Ramirez, Milton Hardin Ramsey, Roger Lee Reed, Edward Rowan Reed, Jr., Willie Lee Richardson, Gerald George Rosenbaum, Jimmy Calvin Ross, Thomas Edward Ross, Thomas David Rostamo, Roger James Rowell, William Dean Ryan, Frank Agwan Sablan, Donald Ray Samuels, Kenneth Page Sargent, Thomas Edwin Shirich, John Charles Schiffhauer, David Edward Scholes, Stephen Ray Segura, J. Clayton Shelby, John Stephen Simmons, Stephen Lee Smith, Thomas Spadaro, Michael Bruce Spicer, William Columbus Strevel, Jr., Anthony Odell Stringer, Stephen Paul Swatek, Walter Lee Thompson, Roger Allen Thompson, Albert Tejerina, Jr., John Tillman III, John Edward Tipton, Alvin Carnell Toombs, Jr., Willie Tyler, Robert Dale Ewell, Rodolfo Valenzuela, Joe Wayne Vanderpool, Wilbert Michael Webster, Mounts Edward West, James Wheeler, John Herbert White Jr., Frank Wilder, Ben Henry Wilkins Jr., John William Williams, James Thomas Williams Jr., Ver Lloyd Williams Jr., Dennis Eugene Wisniewski, Donald Joseph Wolozek, Don Peter Zarina, Donald Zoboblish, Deland Dwight Zubke.